بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم افتح لنا فتوح العارفين وفقنا التوفيق الصالحين. اللهم علمنا بالقرآن وذكر الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يقربنا منك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا. اللهم أعذنا من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. أصلح لنا شأنه لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما. نويت التعلم والتعليم والنفع انتفاع تذكر تذكير والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على تمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم ودعاء على الهدى دعوة الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى. SubhanAllah, for some reason, sometimes it's as simple as turning the iPad off and turning it on, subhanAllah. Inshallah, one of my teachers says that tribulation on the way, on the path, is a sign of Allah's acceptance. So sometimes, subhanAllah, you think you've done everything, and then, subhanAllah, there is a bit of just minor difficulty. So inshallah, it's a good sign. Okay, so sorry about the delay. Sorry about that, but inshallah. So what I wanted to do, inshallah, last time we actually, I did the sunnahs, but then I went back and looked at the videos and I realized that I actually hadn't done the fard. I couldn't find a video for the pillars of the prayer, and I was like, oh, how did that happen? So, I actually redid some of the slides for the pillars of the prayer. So we're going to do that, and then I'm going to review the sunnahs. This is all within the prayer, and I actually added some sunnahs too that I had missed initially. So alhamdulillah, it's all good. Okay, so the pillars of the prayer are the arkan in Arabic. Rukn is a pillar, one pillar. Right, so it's kind of like the pillars of a house that if anyone falls down, that the house will it doesn't fall, doesn't stand. So same thing with the prayer. If any of the pillars are missed, then the prayer is invalid. So these are also known as the obligations of the prayer or within the prayer. And generally speaking, they're going to be the same, irrespective of whether the actual prayer itself is obligatory or it's actually a sunnah prayer or a nafil prayer. So these are the pillars within the prayer. And then inshallah, we'll do the sunnahs also. So here are the pillars, obligations, or arkan of the prayer. It's the first one is takbirat al-ihram, right? And you just say Allahu Akbar. That's it. And one point that when Sheikh Sadiq was making, he said sometimes people will say things like Allahu Akbar, and that is adding a question. Adding that extra hamza in the front makes it a question. So that prayer would be invalid. And if somebody does it intentionally, saying they're actually intending, oh, is Allah great? Obviously, that's a lot more serious because that takes a person out of the deen. So one just, but if one's doing it unintentionally, one needs to actually make up the prayer. So Allahu Akbar. And then standing for the takbirat al-ihram, right? Standing for the saying of Allahu Akbar. And then we'll go, inshallah, I've started making slides for the one who's not able to pray standing and, the rules related to that. So this is assuming a person is able to stand. So they would have to stand for the takbirat al-ihram, right? And ahrama, right? Or, for example, like we're in the month of Hajj, somebody gets into ihram or saying something is haram by saying the Allahu Akbar, one's made certain things prohibited on oneself, right? Like speech and, so much movement to where the onlooker thinks that one is not praying. And inshallah, when we get into what breaks the prayer, we'll go into that. But this is called the Takbirat al-Ihram. One of the many nice things, like what do they call it? Like a latifa, is one of my teachers mentioned that, when one's doing the Takbirat al-Ihram, actually saying it, and lifting one's hands would be recommended, is when one's actually lifting the hands during the Takbirat al-Ihram, and while one's saying it, that one should intend that one's like pushing the dunya behind oneself. So it's like you have that physical motion, and I think I used to be better about intending that, and inshallah, hopefully after mentioning it today in class, I'll hopefully start doing that. But just one's pushing the dunya behind oneself. So Allah give us tawfiq to do that. So standing for the Takbirat al-Ihram, intention, which is always in the heart. The basis of the intention is in the heart. And then and the basic intention is just whatever prayer you're doing. Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha. And the intention is made while one's saying the Takbirat al-Ihram. So it can't be after the Takbirat al-Ihram is done. So it's while one's saying the Takbirat al-Ihram, and it's again in the heart. So one wouldn't be saying the intention. And then if one's praying behind someone, then one's intending to follow an imam. And one can intend, one can intend, if one's praying behind imam, that whatever the imam made ihram for, i.e. whatever, he intended to pray by this prayer, that's my intention. That's enough of an intention. That suffices. It's not ideal, but one can intend that. Whatever the imams had intended when he entered the prayer, I intend that. Okay, reciting the Fatiha. So this is a pillar per what I was taught is the stronger opinion, is reciting the Fatiha. And then standing while reciting the Fatiha. So that's a separate pillar, right? So one's reciting the Fatiha per what I was taught is the stronger opinion, and then the actual standing while reciting the Fatiha. So that's a separate pillar. And then bowing or ruku', and then standing from the bowing. Believe me, this is not, there's, inshallah, when we get into more details, not everybody does this, standing from the bowing, so. Okay, prostration. So what is prostration? The minimal is the forehead. That's the bare minimal. One of my teachers says, don't learn adab from fiqh books, right? Because this is, in the fard, they'll just tell you the bare minimum. And then the stronger opinion is that the nose is not a fard, but there is an opinion that the nose, meaning putting your nose on the ground when you're doing sajda, that is a fard. And so it's recommended to repeat the prayer in its time if you just did prostration on the forehead, but you didn't put your nose on the ground. So this is the bare minimum. And then, sorry, 1 second. I'm just pulling out my akhtari from 2000 and I don't know, probably about 15, 20 years ago. SubhanAllah. Has so many notes on it. And even after studying sometimes being taught some of the more advanced texts, sometimes you just go back to the more simple ones. So rising, This should be, I'm actually gonna, hang on a second, sorry, there's a mistake here. This should be, rising from the sajda. So rising from the sajda and then sitting for the salam. So just the bare minimum that you need to say, which is the assalamu alaikum, that's the wording. Just sitting for that part is the fard. And then stillness. And what is stillness? That the limbs being still for a period of time, and that's the dominant opinion. That is the mashhur of the madhab. So at every position in the prayer, the limbs being still. And, we had asked about that, and we were told that it's going to vary, from person to person. So, how many seconds does it take for one person at each position? So when they go into ruku, how long does it take for all their limbs to be still? It's just going to vary. So I guess the larger the size, maybe the longer it takes. All right. And then one goes into sajda. How long does it take for the limbs to be completely still? Right. So some people do this kind of swaying where they just swing into sajda and they don't have a moment of stillness, or they stand or they sit back from sajda and then the body's still moving. So rising from the sajda is a fard, right? And having stillness in between these sajdas is a fard. So somebody who actually didn't, wasn't completely still, for example, in between the sajda or at any point, at any position, so the dominant opinion would be that their prayer, they would have to repeat the prayer. And if it's a fard, right, it's problematic. So these are pillars for all the prayers, whether it's fard or sunnah. And then order of these pillars or obligations, meaning that one can't do 3 sajdas in one rak'ah and do one in the other, because the order is off, right? One would need to repeat the prayer, for example. Okay, so these are the end of the pillars within the prayer. Any prayer is invalid if one or more pillars, sorry about that, is missed. So any invalid prayer must be repeated indefinitely. So any invalid prayer, whatever prayer you're praying, nafil, fard, sunnah, if it's invalid, one needs to repeat it. Oh, I actually forgot. Erectness. Okay, erectness, or what's i'tidal? I'tidal has to do with getting up from ruku, or the bowing position, or getting up from sajda. So, and the body needs to be straight when getting up from ruku, or getting up from sajda. And this is the sounder opinion, that it's actually a fard. So sometimes people will just the body is still, they'll get out of the bowing position, but the body's not back up straight. They don't go all the way back up. So according to the sounder opinion, and that was what I was taught, is that the prayer would be invalid. Likewise, getting out of sajda, one goes back into sitting position, so the body should be straight. The back should be straight. So not only should one not be kind of moving, there should be stillness, but then the body should actually be straight. Is that clear, inshallah? Inshallah, the difference is clear. So stillness is a lack of motion, and then the erectness is the straightness of the body. Inshallah, that's clear? Okay, and then going to the sunnahs. Okay, sunnahs, and pay attention to the ones with the asterisk, because those are related to the prostration of forgetfulness. So the iqama, or saying Allahu Akbar, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, hayya ala salah, hayya ala falah, قد قامت الصلاة, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah. So it's sunnah for the man. And it's recommended for the woman to do it silently. Now, I know there's khilaf in the other schools. Some of the other schools may not. It may not be recommended, but the Malikis, they recommend it. I'm just going to move this a little bit. So she used to recite it silently. So alhamdulillah, I do it in all the fard prayers. Or try to at least, reciting one complete surah. So I changed it, we did this last time, I just wanted to clarify that it's one complete surah, so not part of a surah. I know there's some difference, I think, in some of the other schools, so I wanted to mention that. And it's to be done after the Fatiha. That's a separate sunnah, right? Reciting one complete surah after the Fatiha, standing while reciting it, so not sitting, right? And then the silent and the loud recitation wherever applicable, i.e. for the surah and the Fatiha. So when they're talking about silent and loud, I think I changed it to audible. I actually made another slide where because it's slightly different between the men and the women, so I made a slide, I made a chart, so inshallah we'll come back to this. Reciting Sami Allahu liman hamidah, right? So this is another asterisk, so pay attention to where the asterisks are. And inshallah, when we go to the prostration of forgetfulness, just make dua. I want to make a chart to make it really easy, because it's one of the hardest chapters, prostration of forgetfulness. And so I'm trying to make it, inshallah, I want to make as many charts as possible so it makes it, less difficult. I don't know if it'll be easy, but so reciting the Sami Allahu liman hamida, right, for the one coming out of ruku'. So who would be reciting the Sami Allahu liman hamida? That would be the person praying alone, or the imam, right? Because if you're a follower, you don't recite it. So the imam carries that for you. And each takbir is a sunnah, excluding the very first takbir, right? Because you said the first takbir is a fard. And then each of the two tashahuds, right? At-tahiyatu lillahi, az-zakiyatu lillahi, at-tayyibatu, as-salawatu lillahi, assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabiyyu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi as-salihin, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. I'm reciting the one from the Muwatta, but if you've memorized the other one, that's fine. That's that's actually a sounder narration. And this is from the Muwatta. When I was told that this is it's basically hard to recite the one from the Muwatta, so I actually memorized the one for the Muwatta, alhamdulillah. But if you memorize the one that people typically recite, like the Hanafis, and that's fine too if you want to continue with that. Each sitting for the tashahhud, right? Because there's two tashahuds. The actual sitting for the tashahhud part is a sunnah. And then listening to the imam's recitation in an audible prayer. So it's actually discouraged to recite while he's reciting. So you should be listening when he's reciting. Even if he's silent, it's not recommended to do any kind of dua or anything while if he's silent. And I'm just switching to, I have the Mukhtasar Khalil, the commentary open. Sometimes, I mean, it's really, it's all amazing. Sometimes he brings up points and I think, oh, I should really, this is a common mistake. I should go over it in class. So just to see. I'm just switching to the Sunnah section to make sure I didn't forget anything that's... So he says, let's see. Oh, one of the things he says that... So he brings up a point. He says it's one surah, not two surahs, not part of a surah, because that's makruh. So reciting two surahs in one rak'ah, the non-Fatiha, because the Fatiha surah is a surah as well. But when they say surah, they mean not the Fatiha. So reciting two surahs or reciting part of a surah. So definitely not recommended in the Maliki school. But if somebody, for example, if someone actually, like if they're a new Muslim and they, they're just memorizing, they haven't memorized a lot, and if they even recite like a long ayah or a short ayah, they can say noon, then that's enough. They don't have to do prostration of forgetfulness. So okay, and then reciting the Fatiha before the other surah. Right, so not doing the surah and then the Fatiha, not switching the order. Sitting longer than needed to say the salam. So actually just sitting for the assalamu alaikum, that's the fard, right? And then sitting longer to say the salam. So saying, actually it's in not the next bullet point, but the point after that. So lengthening the time when remain still at each position. Meaning, we said the basic stillness to where all the limbs are still, that's the fard, right? We said that's, it's called tumatnina in Arabic. So having at least a moment where all the limbs are still at each position of prayer, that's a fard. And then any extra stillness, like doing a longer sajda and, doing extra tasbih in ruku', those, that's sunnah. Right? It's not, if one leaves it, there's no prostration of forgetfulness, because notice there's no asterisk next to these except for the first one. The other ones don't have an asterisk. So they're not related to prostration or forgetfulness. Okay, a second salam to the imam for the one who caught at least one rak'ah with him. So what the Malikis would do is, so we said you turn to the, it's recommended to turn to the right when you say the initial salam, assalamu alaikum, and at the kum I turn partially to the right, right? And then it's sunnah for me to say a second salam, and then I would turn my head to the front, facing the imam, for the one who caught at least one rak'ah with him. And then a salam to the left if another follower praying on your left. But otherwise, you wouldn't say the second and the third salam if you're praying on your own. And then men only saying the first salam aloud. Right, the first salam aloud. So the salam that gets you out of the prayer. And then sunnah also placing one's nose, but there's a strong opinion that the nose is fard. So if you missed putting the nose on the ground when you're in sajda, it's recommended to repeat the prayer if the prayer time hasn't gone out, but your prayer is valid. So placing one's nose, toes, knees, and palms on the ground during prostration, these are sunnahs. But if one leaves them, there's no prostration of forgetfulness owed. A sutra, or like an object, Imam Sheikh Hamza wrote object in his translation. So any kind of barrier, it's recommended for it to be, the length of a spear, width of a spear. It shouldn't be anything that distracts a person, right? And it should be able to stand on its own. And it's only a sunnah if you fear somebody is going to walk in front of you. And the only part that is, if we're praying, the only part that is our right is that area, up to the area of prostration. So if somebody walks in front of us and they're past our area of prostration, they're not walking into our actual prayer space, they actually didn't do anything wrong. But it's sunnah to place something right beyond one's sajda space if you're fearful that somebody's going to walk in front of you. So it's just good to do that, because if they do, they're sinful. So okay, so it's getting somebody out of sin, which is a good thing. Okay, and then the only other thing I mentioned is, inshallah, we'll do just keep in mind the asterisks, and these are the 8 confirmed sunnahs. They're relevant if one needs to perform the prostration of forgetfulness, and inshallah to be taught, inshallah. So after we do, the next thing will be the recommended acts, and then the discouraged acts, and I also need to go that which breaks the prayer, and as well as if somebody's, the prayer of somebody who's not well, they would pray standing without support, and if they can't, with support, and that order. And then inshallah we'll do the prayer of prostration, the prostration of forgetfulness. Sajda to sahu. Okay, one last point I wanted to go over. So these are the details of the loud or silent recitation. So again, the loud or silent recitation only refers to a person who, only for the Fatiha or the Surah. It's only relevant for the Fatiha or the Surah. Right? So loud, I don't like loud. I think audible is better, right? Isn't it better to say loud? Sounds kind of, I don't know. So audible. Okay, so first of all, which prayers are audible? Jumu'ah is audible. I didn't mention that because that's a congregational prayer. So Maghrib, Isha, Subh, because the Malikis call the dawn prayer the Subh prayer. That's the fard. The non-fard prayer, that's called the Fajr prayer. So when you're making your intention for the fard, you will intend Subh, and then for the non-fard, you would intend Fajr. So the time is Fajr, and the non-fard prayer is Fajr. But the actual fard is called the Subh prayer. Okay, so for the auto prayer, what do you, for the Fatiha and the Surah, for the men, the bare minimum is the praying beside him here, a person praying beside him hears him. That's the bare minimum. And again, this is relevant for audible or silent recitation. If a man in the loud prayers in Maghrib, Isha, or Subh, if he prays to where he can hear himself, he actually doesn't owe a prostration of forgetfulness, but he shouldn't be doing that. But to get the sunnah, the full sunnah, he should be reciting to where at least the person behind him can hear him, right? So that's in Maghrib, Isha, or Subh, if he's yeah, so for the man. And then for the woman, she should, in the audible prayer, she should at least be able to hear herself. And that's as loud as she would go. And she can do that in all the prayers to get out of the difference of opinion between the schools, because in some of the other schools, she's required to be able to hear herself. So if she does that in all the prayers to where she's reciting the Fatiha and the Surah to where she can hear herself, that's totally fine. And the Malikis are actually, mashallah, they're pretty, the mura'atan lil khilaf, giving deference to the difference of opinion between the schools. That's actually, a principle, generally speaking. I haven't studied it in detail, so I don't know the exceptions to it. But here they do. When we were taught it, we were told that there's a difference in the other schools about. Because at least I think one school says she has to be able to hear herself in all the prayers. So it's good to actually just be able to hear herself in all the prayers. And it actually helps to focus, because I do that. I can generally hear myself in all the prayers. I try at least. And then now, okay, so in the silent prayers, which are Dhuhr and Asr, right? Men and women, the minimum is the tongue needs to move. Otherwise, it's not counted as recitation. And in recitation in general, just even when you're reciting Quran on your own, some people will say, well, I was looking at it. Am I allowed to look at it? For example, sometimes with people have questions, like somebody who's able to make ghusl, and they're not, the restrictions related to reciting the Quran. Looking at it doesn't count in recitation, so one has to actually recite it. At least the tongue has to move for it to be considered recitation. So if one says it's, in the situation where it's prohibited to recite it, if one's looking at it, it doesn't count as recitation. And then the maximum is one is able to hear oneself, right? So one shouldn't go louder than that. That's actually too much. So, and it would relate to a prostration of forgetfulness if you go beyond the maximum. And inshallah, we'll cover that when we get to that. Right, so these are, so that's the audible or the silent. And again, this is one of the 8 confirmed sunnahs, and it's related to prostration of forgetfulness. And this is one of the reasons I made this chart. So inshallah, this is clear. Are there any questions? Oops, I think I saw my... Any questions? Should I repeat anything? Does anybody want me to repeat anything? Otherwise, we're done. Wow, that's only like 35 minutes. Alhamdulillah. One of my teachers in Syria, his classes are, all his classes generally, they're pretty short, and I see the wisdom in that, especially if it's a heavy class like fiqh or principles of fiqh or aqidah. So alhamdulillah, we're done. So inshallah, next time I will do the recommended acts, and the recommended acts are lower than the sunnah, because the sunnah are generally what the Prophet ﷺ didn't leave. And one of my teachers mentioned that the proof for this, I guess one of the reasons they didn't put them in the fard category is because there wasn't enough proof to put them in the fard category. So especially the confirmed sunnahs, one doesn't want to leave that. And so next week we'll do the recommended acts. And in general, it's makruh or it's discouraged to leave a sunnah. It's makruh or it's discouraged to leave a sunnah. So there's no punishment related to it, but there's a reward related to it. And then we'll do the mandubat and the makruhat next time, inshallah. So the mandubat or the recommended acts, they're lesser than the sunnah, inshallah. So that's the end of lesson 10. So please review well, and make the intention, inshallah, that one day you'll be teaching someone. I think initially, when Shaykh Hamza started teaching us, I don't know if I had the intention to teach anyone, but subhanAllah, at some point, I changed my intention. So alhamdulillah. And I was mentioning to somebody that we were taught these basic texts several times. Shaykh Hamza went over them with us, and then Shaykh Khatri came in the late 90s, I think even early 2000. He came several times, and then Shaykh Sadi came after that. And we did these several times, and initially one thinks, okay, well, I'm doing this text several times, but there was so much benefit in that it started us to get into the mode of thinking fiqh, that everything one does has an action. And one of the things my teacher was saying, he said, a lot of times people will do a lot of recommended acts. This is, inside or outside of the prayer. But they don't realize that they're doing haram in the process. Or they don't realize that they're doing something makruh in the process. So it's higher to leave something that's even a makruh, even though it's technically there's no punishment associated with it, but it's higher to leave that than do something that's recommended. And one has to leave a haram act. And subhanAllah, it's a lot of times, I think this is one of the wisdoms and why, we did fiqh, the fiqh of tahara, the fiqh of prayer, so many times, is that alhamdulillah, it retrains the nafs to think, okay, what is the ruling of this? Even outside of the prayer, what is the ruling of that? What is the ruling of this? So, for example, somebody, in the home was brought up this issue of somebody was not covered properly in front of their mahram. And they don't follow the Maliki school. I think they're trying to follow the Hanafi school. So I brought up, and they brought up the issue to me to tell this person to cover up a little bit more because they felt really awkward. And I was like, and I gave them the Hanafi ruling. I said, well, I told them, but I just wanted to let you know that it's not required for them to cover this part of themselves completely, according to the Hanafi school. So. But, and that's, some of it's just how we grew up, and so it's culture, and modesty is good. I mean, that person feels shy, and so that's actually a very good thing. But then sometimes people will actually leave certain things. For example, the other madhahib are stricter about the men covering their thighs. In the Maliki madhab, it's makruh, right? But the other schools are stricter in that. So, but sometimes because of one's culture, some of the men get used to, uncovering that, and that is culture. So, and I've been trying, here and there, wherever I can, to point that out, that these are some of our, gods. Like, they had their idols and those were visible, but we have our own idols, and some of that, anytime the culture, if culture clashes with the Sharia, that's our idol. That, we hold on to it so vehemently. Or for example, like the people from the subcontinent, sometimes they're very strict. Anytime somebody recites anything, the Quran, they have to cover their heads, even when there's no non-mahram men around. But they may go outside and their head is not covered. So that's culture also. So sometimes it's good to actually not do those things, especially if people start thinking it's fard. It's good to not do those things just to show to people that, you've made something fard, which is not allowed, especially if somebody thinks it's fard. But it's actually not a fard. We need to actually clarify that to people. So alhamdulillah, the benefit of actually doing fiqh classes regularly, one starts thinking in fiqh mode. And that's the first step to getting close to Allah. That's the first step to being, a wali, is doing the fard and leaving the haram. And sometimes we kind of, we pass the step of the fard and the haram and we go to the recommended acts. Because sometimes it's a lot easier. It's just really difficult to restrain the ego because it's so strong, especially when it gets used to something. Those idols, the cultural idols, are really difficult to break. Except the one whom Allah has mercy for. So may Allah have mercy on us and give us tawfiq to make the difficult easy and make us beacons of light to where we can share this with people in the best way. Asking for your du'as on this blessed day, in this blessed month. Jazakallah khairan for listening. Wa jazallahu anna sayyidina sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ahlu. Jazallahu anna sayyidina sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ahlu. Jazallahu anna sayyidina sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ahlu. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Jazakallah khairan. So inshallah next Thursday we'll try for inshallah 11. Inshallah. Jazakallah.